because of Jesus Christ. And if you were here at church last night, then you heard my story. And yet, this is a little more intimate group. These are my people. So I'm not going to read this again. So, Regen, God has delivered me from so much, from decades of bitterness and resentment, from a growing need of justice, and from the shame of my 7 abortions and my divorce. It started in California. I'm from Southern California, and I was born to 2 very broken individuals who desperately needed Jesus. And my dad's disdain for me started before I was ever born. It was in the womb. My mom was very, very sick, and the doctors told her that she needed to abstain from sex. And yet my dad would not be told no. And so that started his disdain for my life, and it never stopped. And so I lived this very chaotic life growing up. We moved place to place. My dad couldn't keep a job, or he chose not to. And it was me and my 2 siblings, and we struggled to find any sense of normalcy in these move after move after move. And it was between hotels and cars and trailers and nothing normal. And so I struggled to really make friends. I struggled to trust people. And more than anything else, I really struggled to trust God. And we would go to church, and we would come home, and my father was very, very violent, mostly to my brother, and I got the second part of it, but it was devastating. But the most probably impactful thing in my life was my dad's sexual perversion. And during Regen, God very tenderly reminded me of an experience that I had when I was 5, where out of a fit of rage, he sexually molested me. And in God's grace, I didn't remember until the right time, until he took me through it. And that would change everything in my life about how I viewed myself and my trajectory. And more than anything else, that I would never trust men, and I would definitely not trust God. And so, long story short, my mom finally got done with the chaos, and she left, and I was 12. And she actually left us with our parent, my dad. And through this tumultuous time, I pretty much started raising myself at that age. And eventually moved back in with my mom. And my mom ended up meeting my now stepfather. So that meant yet another move. That was move 18 for me. And that was my 2nd year of high school. So here I was in Mission Viejo, California, and I met a 19-year-old young man who would become my husband, boyfriend for the next 26 years. And this young man was heavily addicted to porn before I ever met him. And here I was, this 14-year-old girl, and I was an easy way of gratifying his sexual pleasures. And yet at this point, that's all I thought I had to offer. Between my dad and losing my virginity when I was 13, and having multiple situations where I've used by people much older than me. And that's all I thought I had to offer. And so we started our relationship, 14 years old. Not soon long after, I got pregnant for my first time. And I was terrified. And I had just turned 15. And nobody wanted it. And as much as I thought, like, could I raise this baby? It was an immediate, nope, we're going to get this fixed. And we're going to fix this quickly. And so Planned Parenthood, gave me the lie that I needed and that I embraced, which was, it's just a clump of cells. It's going to be an easy fix. You'll be in and out. And as I laid on that table with my first abortion, something died with me when I lost that fetus. And that would change the rest of my life. 1 led to 7. And people are like, Dani, why didn't you take birth control? I tried. I just couldn't remember. Because after that first one, I struggled to just get out of bed. I fell into a dark, dark place. And during high school, it became just kind of normative. I was so numb. It's so interesting how our own sin can become so numb. And not only that, I became that beacon of advice for other women in my high school who were in that same desperate place, searching for hope, searching for an answer. Long story short, joined the Air Force, trying to run away from him. I couldn't run away from him because it was me that I was trying to run away from, and we ended up eloping. And 26 years of a very, very toxic cycle and very abusive. And yet I didn't know it because it was so much like what I grew up with. He was so much like my dad. And ended up getting pregnant. I was 20 years old. This time it was okay. I had just had an affair in the Air Force because I was still searching for love in all the wrong places, even though I was married. So I did not know who the father was. But when I gave birth to my baby girl on December 31st, 1994, she's sitting over there, all the lies came off. I could not stand under the lies of what I believed my whole life anymore about my abortions. I was a murderer. I was a 20-year-old murderer. And I had destroyed the lives of 7 children, just like the one I was holding. My son came soon after, and the next decades, I struggled to try to find God. I struggled to try to do the right thing. I would lead worship. I would pray. I would fast. I would do all these things in this hope to quench this war within me. And nothing helped. Finally, I left after 26 years. I read a book, Codependent No More, and my eyes were forever opened. And that led me down a path that was even darker. I walked away from my faith. I stepped into the New Age religion, hoping to find hope and peace, and I didn't find anything. Because at this point, in my mind, God had failed me miserably. If he had loved me, why did he let me suffer the way I had? And when I was in the midst of the worst place in my life, I was living in Tahoe, California with a schizophrenic Buddhist as I was going through my divorce, which was awful. God found me on the beach. And one of my New Age friends had an experience and an interaction with Jesus where she found him. He found her, and it was obvious. And she came to tell me, Dani, Jesus loves me, and he loves you too. And I was angry and jealous at the same time. And yet that was the beginning of my rescue mission. I ended up back in Las Vegas, one of 36 places that I've lived. And I still was just dark, running, trying to find something that would fill my soul. And that meant man after man after man after man until I met one that I would end up marrying. And he's the first man in my life that has ever loved me. And God led me to a safe place, and he led me to a safe space, and he started to heal the darkness that was in me, the wounds deep within me. And my friend actually had gone to Regen in Texas, and we were living in Washington at the time, and there was nothing around. So when we moved here, moved 36 for me, Missouri, in 2022, and Abundant Life had Regen, I knew I wanted to be here. But I had no idea what God was going to do. What he did in Regen for me is he took me beyond the fact that I was a victim, and he showed me all the damage that I had done. I knew I was a murderer, right? I knew that I had been in an abusive situation. I had been sexually abused multiple times in my life, but man, I added to that destruction. I ran from God when I could have run to God. I ran in every possible way, and yet God ran farther than I could run. And what he taught me was biblical forgiveness, biblical amendments, biblical reconciliation, and he taught me that I could trust him with my justice. I could trust him with my heart, and I could trust him for whatever came next. If knowledge was what you were looking for healing, which is great with counseling, it will never be enough. We have to surrender to the biblical Jesus. He's our only answer. And because of that, I can stand before you today as a new creation. I'm Dani, and I'm grateful to be here.